Welcome. It's the ShopNotes Podcast, episode number 194. I'm Phil, joined by John and Logan today. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the delights of shop snooping, talk about some tours. We have a milling question for Logan to address, and we'll maybe dive into some mythical woodworking tools. Kind of like the hodag, if you're from Wisconsin and are familiar with that mythical beast as well. So thanks for joining us, everybody. It's time to dive in. First, we have a little announcement from our sponsor. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Grizzly Industrial, purveyor of fine woodworking machinery since 1983. Buy direct and save, grizzly.com. First, a couple of comments from last week's episode. Bob Puppy Doc says, in response to John's comment about the lever right, his father-in-law's version of it's a doohickey, but don't confuse it with a hickey-doo. Mm-hmm. Oh man, and you're going to Grizzly. I'd love to spend some time drooling over all the tools. Thanks for all the input on benches and vices. When it's done, I'll have to send you pictures. I'm pretty pleased with how it's going. Still owe you pictures of the pegboard cabinet. It's done. He just hasn't organized it and cleaned up the shop enough to do it justice.
Photos or BS?
Yeah.
Right.
Fix or didn't happen.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Put up or shut up, Bob.
Yeah. User EdTech said he was an industrial arts major in college and they had a Bridgeport in their wood shop and they used it for accurate wood joints, which I totally get. Terry writes, but not that Terry, the adjustable boring bar is used on a milling machine with a single carbide tip to enlarge an existing hole. Very precise. They are fantastic in a metalworking shop.
Yep, I found a video of one running that I sent to Phil and John after we podcasted. Was not what I was expecting, but it makes sense now.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. We also talked about dust collection in that episode, and another comment on, I'm not going to try and read his handle name, says, my woodworking club has 2 saw stops back to back, both with overhead dust collection, but we chose to run the flex hose vertically right off the rear of the blade guard to a ceiling mounted duct to the collector. We do not have the saw stop brand over our mechanism. Our system works well for our uses. Which you had kind of hinted at too, Logan, as a possibility.
Yeah, run straight to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to remember who had that. It was a commercial one that kind of did that. I think it was like Excalibur. Was that the Excalibur?
Excalibur had one, and I think there was one called like the Shark, or maybe it was Shark by Excalibur. I think that's the one I had that I had sold. I think I sold it to a listener. But yeah, I think that would be good. I think it was maybe it was the podcast. This last week, my brain's fried. I haven't caught up yet. I'm still on West Coast. But like, I've been very happy with how this is working now that I got all my seams taped up, so I don't have any desire to change anything on it.
Yeah. Now, he mentions saw stops back to back. However, in the studio the other day, you were bringing up another saw stop arrangement possibility.
Yeah, and to be completely fair, this was not my idea. I saw somebody do it on one of the Saw Stop Facebook pages.
Okay.
They had their saw stop, and then on the right-hand side where the like phenolic wing is, instead of having that wing, they had a Delta Unisaw bolted on it. So they were like side-by-side saws.
Okay.
And I'm like, you know what? That's actually a fantastic idea. Because I would then set up one saw for just standard rips and crosscuts. That'd be the left-hand saw as the user, as you're looking at it. And then the right-hand saw I would set up as a dado saw. And the reason for that is I could then set... Now, it wouldn't work with my overarm dust collector, so I would have to go to the ceiling with it. But I could set it up so that this Harvey fence I have, this Big Eye fence, you could swap the side that aluminum extrusion's on. So then the dado saw, which would be the right-hand saw, you would use the fence on the left-hand side of the blade.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. And when would I ever... I mean, I would never really have a need to move anything. Everything would need to scoot away from the wall a little bit further, I think, to accommodate a second cabinet. But I'm thinking that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, in the same line of thought that having an 800 horsepower Ferrari makes sense, but
yeah, you said that, and for all the people just listening on a podcast, John put his skeptical face on.
I know.
It's so crazy, it just might work.
Exactly. That's yeah, but. Think about it. Just think about this. And the reason I brought this up is because I was filming yesterday. I must have brought it up yesterday.
Yeah.
No. I was doing dados for... Oh, yeah. I was doing dados for I was doing grooves for that bottom of that drawer.
For the drawer.
For that video. Yeah. And I said during filming, not with cameras rolling, but this is the thing I hate doing in my shop. More than anything, I hate changing dado blade out, like flipping back and forth from a dado blade to a regular blade. I despise it, and the reason is that with the saw stop, I have to change cartridges, so it's not just a blade swap; it's cartridge swaps, it's a throat plate insert swap, it's everything. And it always seems like I don't plan, and this is a reflection upon myself and my work habits. I don't plan on out far enough ahead that I get all my crosscuts and all my rips done at once, and then I go back and dado stuff. I don't do that. I should, but I don't.
But even
like
in the...
I'm working on this part and then going to this, then working on this other part, and,
Yeah, but say you were building cabinets or something, or a cabinet, you would do those outer carcass pieces and the joinery on it, and then from there... you would derive your part sizes for interior dividers and panels and things like that.
So inherently, you're going to be flopping back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's why I just advocate for the ripping and cross-cut dado blade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But it's the wide kerf blade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit more waste, but you're saving up in labor and time.
Yeah.
So.
That makes sense. So,
but I think this is a great idea. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have a separate saw in the Woodsmith production shop dedicated for dado blades, which is nice. But you're taking this to a whole new concept of integrated workstations.
Yes. I'm taking this to a whole new level of efficiency.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So, can I justify buying another $3,000 saw? No. But if somebody happens to have one for sale, yeah, absolutely.
Because would you do it as a saw stop out of curiosity?
I would only for two reasons. Teaching here. I mean, just teaching.
That's a big
I need
thing.
to have it. Yes. And second, then I want to have to dink around with a different saw height. Like if you bring like a unisaw or something in next to a saw stop, there's probably a little bit of height difference. As long as I get a PCS, a professional cabinet saw, it should be exactly the same height of the saw I have.
Right.
And then I can just bolt those two wings together. I'm curious. I'm going to stand up and measure it while you guys are going to the next comment. I'm interested to see if it would actually fit.
Okay. All right. This is the benefit of listening to the ShopNotes podcast, is because we are on the cutting edge of woodworking research.
Mm-hmm. We are, figuring it out in real time.
Yeah. Yeah.
She would fit like a glove for anybody wondering.
Right.
So I have the 36-inch fence on mine. The top of the SawStop PCS, so there is the top, then there's a small metal wing, and then there's the phenolic wing. So
Sure.
the top from the left-hand side of the saw to where that first metal wing is 32 inches. From there to where the current phenolic ends, it's 36. So there's plenty of room there for the saw, and I might even need spacers. But things are happening.
Okay.
So,
All right. For those of you wondering whether Logan actually needed another power tool project, here's your answer. So at our next club meeting, he'll present a paper on side-by-side table saw. We'll do that as, yeah. So bring your comments.
Okay. Here is a real question, though.
Okay.
If you were buying a new saw, and SawStop, for example, had an option for a 2-arbor table saw, where there was 2 throat plate inserts side by side, 4 or 5 inches apart. You could load up a dado blade in one, a regular in the other, 2 independent lift mechanisms, and it was an extra, 50% of the price. So say instead of a $3,000 saw, it was a $4,500 saw. Would that warrant the extra cost to you guys?
Okay.
I'm not hating it.
No.
I think there's something there.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll put that as a question on the show notes page and on the YouTube channel. So if you are prone to comment on the YouTubes, fill that in. The other addendum question that I would have is Logan's crazy as a fox idea of a side-by-side table saw. I've seen on the internets, Frank Howarth, among other people, will do back-to-back table saws, maybe offset slightly. Poll question is, which one do you think is the better idea here? So,
and hear me out.
Throw that out there.
A bunk table saw, like stack them.
Yeah, double decker.
You got a lot of room in your shop. Up this way, we're not using it.
That is true. That is true.
The London bus model, I believe, is what that's called.
I have one of my contributing writers, Willie Sandry. He does have back-to-back saws. He has a Laguna Fusion 2, I think, and then he has the SawStop, and he kind of has one set up as his joinery saw and one set up as his other stuff saw, and it works really nicely for how he has it set up. I probably have the room to do that. It's just having 2 dedicated footprints of a table saw seems silly.
Right.
If you can,
it's
if
the
you
same
can put
motor.
them in one footprint,
Or it's the same table.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost as if you needed like a singular power source for your entire shop, and then just connected tools with different belts and stuff to be able to engage from that.
And if my name was Jack, we would call it a jack shaft. It'd be great.
I think we got something here.
Yep.
Cutting edge.
Always new ideas.
It all comes back around. It always comes full circle. They were talking about turning cargo ships into wind-powered ships, like by putting big kites on them.
Wow.
It's like, holy cow, gosh, if only they had that when they sailed to America. That would have been way faster.
Yeah. If only our ancestors didn't have to get water from rivers.
I know.
And then so that their descendants could complain about whether it was easy to change one saw blade to another.
Okay, so I all this is to say I understand that we in here do more woodworking than most people do. So I am changing blades a lot more often than most people. So I understand my big issue may be a non-issue for most people.
Sure. No.
I understand this fully.
Yeah. We're eyes wide open here. But if you ignore the SawStop component of it, I feel like it's not outside the realm of possibility for someone to have 2 contractor's saws purchased from the used market and bolt them together side by side, because you could make a custom base so that they would be at the same height or back to back or something like that. So there's not, and like you said, we're not advocating that somebody go out and buy $7,500 worth of brand new tooling in order to accomplish this. It's more about the speculations of what a dream shop would look like. And especially to suit both the tools and the space to match what you do.
Yeah. Now, if you could bolt 2 saw stops together with a router table in between them, you just have a woodworking island then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like a 5-in-1
Dr.
tool.
Moreau or something. Yeah.
It's like a 5-in-1 tool, man. If only people made those.
Right. But this is like the Southern Iowa redneck version of it.
No hate to all our Southern Iowa listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or Northern Missouri, which we know is worse.
Right, yeah. Once you cross that border, you're on your own.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the milling question on here.
Yeah. I didn't see it, so I'm going to be blindsided.
Yep, it's better fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, before we get to the milling question, because of fresh comments, hang on. The previous podcast, episode 192, we were talking about shapers, the difference between shapers and router tables. Adam writes in and says, really enjoy your show, guys. You might do some homework on the shaper or tell us you don't know.
I mean, I thought that was very clear when we were answering that question.
We never read the book. We're just winging the book report here.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm pretty sure we said I've never used the shaper.
Right.
So
I also think that we need to rewrite our show description then if somebody thinks that they're getting deep levels of research here as well.
This is for entertainment purposes only.
yes. I feel like we've said that before.
Yeah. Disclaimer.
Although, so we did talk to Shiraz at Grizzly about the shaper last week.
Yes.
So
And he
kind of
loves
from the
his
horse's
shaper.
mouth, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He had one shaper table set up. He had 2 router tables there. He had a woodpecker's one and then a grizzly one.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Shiraz, you got both here. What do you prefer? He said, shaper, no question about it.
Yeah, not even close.
Not even close. He said mainly because I think he said mainly because of the weight.
Yeah.
The noise was a big one as well because we ran some video of him running the shaper. The noise was significantly less, like a third of the sound of a router table. So yeah.
Yeah.
Still don't know much about shapers, but
No, but having seen his in use where he put a router collet in the shaper so that he could run router bits in it was kind of nice. And, the built-in variable speed that I think is a little bit more finely tuned than a variable speed on a universal router motor, I believe is pretty handy.
Yep. He did have a pretty sweet floor sweep system set up to collect chips from his router table. So he had a big plastic floor sweep. I think Grizzly sells those. They're meant as like a it would run down to the ground. You could sweep chips and stuff into it. But he had added spacers and magnets to the bottom of it, so it was like this really wide, probably 16-inch wide opening that you could position right around the router as it was running, and it was all plastic. So if you run it into the router bit, no big deal. But it worked great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while since we've checked in on some of the comments, but there was a few others on here because in that one we also talked about the pin router and then shop shoes again. Yeah. Terry Lucas says, just like John, wear whatever tennis shoes I find in the closet. And I'm trying to convert his one-car garage into a shop with an emphasis on wood turning.
Yeah.
which is a solid idea.
Mm-hmm.
Another one comment says, I wear my everyday sneakers in the shop. Nothing fancy, just like John. Similar rotation from new to mowing. Floyd Olden says, I have a pair of Merrill slip-ons he likes for shop work. Good leather shoes, comfortable, fairly solid toe box. No steel toes, but my excuse is that I don't make big projects and don't use sharp objects that much.
I feel like most of us don't use sharp objects very often.
Yeah. And then he says, I, for one, look forward to the podcast each week. Phil's a great moderator. Logan seems to always have an anecdotal incident that fits in, and John joins in with his humor and quick wit. It's almost like three guys sitting around at the coffee shop having a good old time. Keep up the work. Yeah, you're welcome.
See, we never had that type of coffee shop in my little town. It was the Breakpoint gas station. So you'd always walk in there and people would be hanging out around the one table in the gas station till like 11. Mm-hmm. It's like, tell me you're a farmer without telling me you're a farmer. They had been at work for 8 hours, went to the gas station, hung out there till lunchtime, and then went and kept working.
New Mexico Dan says the modern Power Pro Shopsmith can be a drill press, horizontal drill press, overarm router, under table router, and that's all in one tool with a speed range from 250 to 10,000 RPM. Oh yes, Shopsmith can be used as a shaper.
Let me give it one of the fills.
Yeah.
I feel if we say anything, we're just going to rile up the Shopsmith people again.
Right.
Hey, let's do it. Let's do it. We throw hands.
Yeah. Alfita says, I wear track shoes and I don't even have a track saw. I have a track AccuCut or a Craig AccuCut, but is that the same as a track saw? Like shaper versus router? Will we ever know? Yeah.
Nope.
These are all questions. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Grizzly Industrial, purveyor of fine woodworking machinery since 1983. Buy direct and save, grizzly.com. All right. So enough of the diversionary nonsense, and we'll go back to the intentional nonsense.
Regularly programmed.
Yeah. And then go to the milling question. And it's from Eric. He writes, highly respect all the knowledge and tidbits I glean from you three. Now, truthful but buttery out of the way, let's pretend that this is a text to you three, and if I don't get an answer, I'll be disappointed. When I mill green logs on my bandsaw, so just a regular bandsaw, do I do any damage by running the remaining log over the joiner to flatten the face before resuming milling? In other words, do I run the risk of heavy pitch or anything else on the cutter heads?
I mean, okay, so first of all, I feel like because this is a text to us, we don't respond for 3 days until 3 a.m. in the morning when we randomly remember that text.
You up?
Right. Yeah.
You up? So yes, you will absolutely get more pitch if that's a green log. You're not doing any damage per se, other than you're loading up your joiner blade is a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, you're smoothing out the surface, so I would say, theoretically, I think you might be helping yourself by doing that because you're evening out the surface, and evening out the surface is going to allow moisture to escape more evenly. So if you have a really rough surface, you got a lot of ends of fibers coming out, water can escape quickly from some of those that aren't frayed, it can't escape as quickly. So I would say theoretically, you're probably helping yourself by smoothing out that surface. But anytime you work with a wet piece of wood like that, you are going to load up pitch a little bit more. Now, you're probably going to get a little bit nicer shaving coming off your jointer with it being a fresh piece of wood. So it might be a wash. You might not notice it because that shaving's coming off a little bit more nicely. But I guess in my shop, I've never really I've never really taken the time to take a green log to the jointer in between like ripping boards off. Because I have, like, if I get a little log, like a little piece of apple wood or something, I'll cut it on the bandsaw instead of the sawmill because I can't hold it.
Yeah.
I've never jointed them though. I don't see any reason not to, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I was wondering, I mean, about the only thing that I would maybe add is depending on how green, like there might just be some more moisture in there that you might want to just be aware of that to wipe down the joiner beds for rust kind of a thing. With the saw or with the jointer off and unplugged, maybe wipe down spritz some blade cleaner in there or something just to clean out any gunk. Hit it with the air compressor.
Yeah. He did not say whether he had a helical head or not, did he?
Did not.
Okay. I think this is an instance where straight knives would probably be a little bit better.
Oh, okay.
Just because there's a lot of nooks and crannies in a segmented cutter head for moisture to sit in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if it's spraying water, like if that tree got knocked down yesterday and you're doing it today, it's going to be spraying water. If it, like Phil said, if it's, last summer's log that you're cutting up, it's not going to be as wet. It'll still be wet, but it won't be as wet.
Yeah. All right. Now, it's not always sunshine and roses around here at ShopNotes and Woodsmith and Popular Woodworking. There are people that are dissatisfied with some of the things that we do. Which leads me to a recent reader comment that I got that says, I've been subscribing to your magazine for about 35 plus years. I will not be renewing my subscription. The past several years, your magazine has gone downhill tremendously. The quality of the plans is no comparison to what they used to be, and that was one of the main reasons I subscribed. Plus, the amount of advertising that you shoved into the pages of the magazine is obscene. And I get the feeling that your wokeness is more of a priority than the quality of the articles in the magazine.
I feel like this is one of those like Jimmy Kimmel, celebrities reading mean tweets about themselves.
Roast us.
So this is like, editors reading mean emails.
So there you are. Just to say.
So do you have a response?
I did have a response. I responded to this reader.
Okay. So what was your response for the class?
All right. Let me, I'll pull that up. That's a good idea.
If anybody's going to respond to that, I'm glad it's Phil. He's the most even-keeled, calm responder, I think, of the group.
Well, I'll just read the one that I was sent in. It was a lady that had gotten a free subscription. She said, "Hey, got your magazine. Please cancel this free subscription that I had. I got the June issue." And I was really disappointed to see that it was all men as the contributing writers. As a woman who's a furniture maker, it was just really disappointing to see, not see my demographic represented. So my response back to her was, hey, I'm not going to say the lady's name. Hey, I got, good afternoon. I got your email. It's unfortunate that you got the June issue and you're basing your perception of our contributing writer base on that one issue. Because if you had gotten the previous issue, you would have seen that on the cover, there was a lady who's a world champion bird carver. And off the top of my head, over the last 6 issues, we've had at least 4 female contributing writers, which is about 25%. And last week I happened to be on location with a female contributing writer, shooting photos. I said, to be clear, yes, most of our writers fall into that male demographic, and that's because it is simply a numbers game. We have a vast majority of woodworkers that are male, and that leads to most of the contributing writers also being male. It's not what we want necessarily, but that's what it is. At the end of the day, I don't care the gender of the writer. I don't care about the race. I don't care about any of that as long as they're a quality craftsperson that can teach our reader base. I said, I know that there are some titles that actively search out for, minority demographics, whether that's younger people or women or whatever, and to me that kind of feels like trying to tick a checkbox, whereas I'm looking at the project and the quality of the project first and foremost. The writer's secondary. I don't care who the writer is. I mean, it could be. I mean, if it was a 9-year-old kid that builds world-class furniture, great. I'll help him spell, maybe, or he might help me spell during his article or her article. And she just followed back and said, hey, I really appreciate your follow-up. I realize that the vast majority are men. She said she entered the field of prosthetics and orthopedics 35 years ago, and only 12% were women at that time, and now a majority of them are women, where men are now the minority in that. So she said, in her opinion, when people speak out, voices are heard and everyone benefits. And I don't disagree with that. So it just it was an interesting take. I understand how somebody entering a field, whether it is a woman or a man entering a traditional female field, they don't see themselves represented in what they are reading. I get that could be a turnoff and discouraging, but you have to look past that. And I know that's hard sometimes.
Yeah, and like we're joking around. We really do not mind critique, good or bad. Like we appreciate it. It's more of when people come in with like vague like critiques like your wokeness, and it's like, what does that mean? It's like, yeah, we understand there's advertising in the magazine, and that's just like, necessary to keep costs down of the magazine, and you might have whatever opinions on the plans or projects, but it's like when you just come in with like vague attacks, it's like we joke, we don't really take it that seriously, because it's like, no, what does that even mean? Be specific.
Well, I mean, if you're spicy, you're going to get a spicy response.
Yeah.
I mean,
and we like
let's call it what it is.
Yeah,
spicy. Yeah. We love throwing hands.
Yeah. We feed on hate. So bring it.
All right. So here's my response. Found it. Okay. Said, good afternoon. Reading an email like yours is tough, but I appreciate you taking the time to write. One of the things we pride ourselves on is the long-lasting subscribers that are part of what we do. If you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate if you could answer a few questions I had. The Woodsmith staff is made up of quite a few devoted woodworkers. The projects we select for each issue is meant to reach a broad level of interest and skills. In what way do you see these projects being lesser than in past years? Would you provide a few specific examples? By way of explanation, Woodsmith includes 5 projects per issue. That's more than have ever been included in the magazine. I agree that including advertising in Woodsmith has been a struggle for us on the editorial and design side. However, it's a good idea to keep eggs in more than one basket, so to speak. Several years ago, we added pages, moving from 52 to 68 pages, knowing that advertising was coming. This way, we had the same amount of projects and articles as in the past. Competing with all the free stuff online is serious business, so including advertising helps to keep our subscription cost as low as we can. Please help me understand what you mean by this comment. I get the feeling that your wokeness is of more a priority than the quality of the articles. Finally, I invite you to come tour our offices in Des Moines, Iowa. I'd like to show you around the shop, studios, and have you meet the staff. It'd be a good chance to talk about woodworking and how to get a new generation of woodworkers excited about the craft. Stay well, Phil Huber.
Oh, you had to tell him to stay well. Gee.
And don't get me wrong, our wokeness is a priority, but more of a priority than the project.
And Phil saying, we invite you to come meet us at our offices. He means in the parking lot.
Yeah, that was a veiled threat, Phil. I bet maybe he's an Tarja fan, and we just haven't done any. So it's like
he does Shopsmith in Tarja.
Yeah.
Shopsmith in Tarja out of ash.
But no, like seriously, Phil or John makes a great point. Like we do appreciate, like, because you can have an issue that everybody loves, and you don't hear a dang thing about it.
Yeah,
like people will come in and say, "Hey, got that last issue? That was amazing." Like you might get a comment here or there.
But it's pretty rare.
But a lot of the time, a lot of times it's just flying blind. It's like, I mean, we can send out after issue surveys and stuff, but like it doesn't really give you a good pulse on what readers are thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Like the best we can do is we can give you stuff that us as woodworkers find interesting.
Yeah.
Like if there's a project that's presented to me as a project pitch, and I'm like that seems like a dumb project, I don't publish it because it doesn't interest me. Now that means clearly my content's a little biased to what I like, but I try to find stuff that I think people will find interesting. And if we don't get comments, good or bad, we're assuming that everyone's fine with what we're doing. But when we get comments about people saying, hey, really like that, or hey, that was a silly project, here's why I think it's a silly project. That's the part that's missing, is here's why I think it's a silly project.
Yeah.
That's what's missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is sometimes we'll get on the same issue, like, hey, that project was really silly. Why did you really include that? But then get just as many emails. Hey, I loved this project, and I'm glad you
100%.
went outside the normal box of things that you do. So it's like, which one do you weigh more? It's like some people really like it, some people don't. And then, like what Phil says, like we're doing 5 projects now. We can only do so many bookcases and sideboards and coffee tables and that kind of thing. So it's like sometimes we like to maybe stretch the boundaries of what we normally do and try new stuff, and So.
Well, and another thing that we've always talked about is, presumably, if we are doing our job correctly, you now, as a woodworker 35 years after you started your subscription, should be a much better woodworker than you were 35 years ago. So when you first started getting whatever magazine, Woodsmith, Popular Woodworking, Fine Woodworking, Wood Magazine, if you're getting any of these, the projects back then would have appeared much grander scale and much more elaborate than they do now. Because now you are 35 years down your woodworking career. Things should start to click a little bit better for you. So that's a hard thing for any of us to take a unbiased look at, because myself, I say the same thing with, things outside of woodworking. I'm like, wow, this has really went downhill. It's like, well, no, my perception of whatever this is has changed.
Is this like, did Olive Garden go downhill, or did we just get more bougie?
Yeah, we got more bougie.
That's the question. That's the question we would be asking ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that's a relatable thing. Like, I don't know.
Yep. If we do our jobs, you should outgrow us. You get sick of us, is what you're saying. If we're doing a good job.
Yeah, if we're doing a good job, you should not need us in 25 years.
Yeah.
That's why we add these little mistakes in to every other project.
Right.
Is just to keep people on their toes and to keep them
How closely
guessing.
were you actually reading this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. 100%.
That's fair. Can totally see that. All right. As we mentioned last time, Logan and I went to Bellingham, Washington, to the global headquarters of Grizzly Tools to do some filming for filming in relation to the Woodsmith Shop TV show. And as part of it, we got a tour of the founder, Shiraz, who's been on the show here before, his shop at Grizzly. And fully knowing that Shiraz has the ability to outfit his shop all the way, it was still
with whatever he wants.
It's still kind of fun and reminds me of the delight of going to see somebody else and seeing their workshop and kind of snooping around a little bit just to see how other woodworkers work. Even if you build almost the same sorts of projects, you're always going to see a little bit or a lot bit of the personality of that person in the shop space.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of cool.
And so just to kind of paint the landscape. So Shiraz has this shop at their office. It's his personal tools. So he made sure to point out that these weren't tools that he just grabbed off the floor. Like, he bought them, he paid sales tax on them. to keep his books clean, because his family, comes from a long line of accountants. I'm reading his autobiography right now, so I know this. But there is the only people allowed to work in there are Shiraz and then a gentleman by the name of Dave. I think it was Dave, right?
Yeah, Dave. No last name
and
given.
No, Dave, no name.
Like Cher.
Yes. So Dave, there's two halves of this shop, and this shop is, what do we decide, like 70 by 70? Like, it's 5,000 square foot.
Yeah.
It's big. Because it's a warehouse from a company that Shiraz had bought and shut down, and moved some of his machinery, whatever. And it's split, not in half, but probably in a third, 2/3.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? Of metalworking tools along one wall, and then the rest of it's woodworking tools. And it was cool because Dave was kind of in there, and Shiraz is like, look, Dave's the only other person that's allowed to work in here besides me. And a lot of the times Dave's kind of like Shiraz's personal shop helper.
Shop buddy.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but it's like Shiraz will be like, hey, we have this tool. I had this idea. Can you modify it to do this? And Dave's like, yeah, we'll make it work. And he was in there. When we were in there one day filming, he was over on the metal lathe milling new handles for this little like cheap Chinesium rotary table that they had for a vertical mill, or we would be filming with Shiraz and he'd be like, yeah, this wasn't like this, and this was Dave that did this, stuff like that. His little trucker knobs on his chuck key and on his milling machine handles, like that type of thing. It's like, that's pretty fun.
Yeah,
So.
one of the things was that I thought was cool, and I hadn't seen it in that form, was a thread checker, but it was wall mounted. So this long vertical piece that had all the thread counts, both, male and female versions of it. So you could check, it was English and metric. Most of the time you see them and it just looks like a weirdo nut and bolt on a, braided steel wire or something like that you lose in a drawer and you wonder exactly what that thing is. But this one being wall mounted, I thought was super cool.
Yeah. And it was interesting because there's some very, very close similarities with most of our shops and Shiraz's, and then there are some very, very vast differences.
Yeah. Because Shiraz had, one of the things he demonstrated was, we wanted to see how he uses his vertical mill for woodworking. So he took the vertical mill, and then he said one of the things he uses it for was essentially like flush trimming. So he had drilled a hole in a piece of wood, and then he quickly goes over to his metalworking lathe and creates a plug. Yeah, Logan's got it. Creates a plug on the metal lathe, parts it off, taps it in, and then puts a big facing bit in his vertical mill, and then just buzzes it perfectly flat. I mean, just...
Well, no, he said he left it 3,000ths proud for sanding.
Right, yeah.
Which he did. Like, you can barely feel it. And it was funny because he's like, yeah, I'll just drill this hole quick. So he drilled the hole with the mill, turned the plug, and then he went to face it off, and this spun because he didn't put any glue in it. He's like, I was like, let's just wick some CA glue in there. He's like, no, I'll just make another plug, like 0.5 bigger.
Yeah.
And he did, and he had to tap it in there, and it worked perfect. Like, that thing's never coming out.
So anyway, and just to see how he had different, you could tell that the vertical mill was one of the main tools in the shop just by the way it was set up. He had all of his bits and accessories kind of really easy to get to, and was able to know exactly where it was really without looking. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool. So anyway, I that's why I invite people to come to the shop here a lot to take a tour, because in reality, I mean, yes, you get a behind the scenes look of how a magazine or a TV show or whatever gets made, which has its own curiosity. kind of factor, but it's really kind of peeking in to how, when you're in the main shop, to see like how Dylan works, how Chris works, how Mark and Steve work. Like they have their spaces set up the way they have them that suits their personalities and working styles. And then you come in like the studio here, and it's a really weird Freudian experiment of personality in here, just because it depends on who was filming last, or, you know, if I was working on a lunchtime project, or John was putting together tips for the next issue, or creating a prototype or something like that. So, yeah. So as much as we like to be solitary woodworkers in our own shop, it's really cool to be able to see somebody else's workspace. You know, John and I get to come out to your shop, Logan, a few times when we're filming or whatever. And it's always cool to see, like, broadly, it's the same, but different every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's the same, but different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And not only is it like cool to go into Shiraz's type shop where it's like dream shop that knows no bounds, but to go into somebody's small shop or one car garage where they're making do, like what kind of clever solutions do they come up with because they're, you know, short on space or can't fit a lot of tools in there, or, you know, that kind of thing. And same when we get photographs of, you know, people sending tips, we're always kind of looking in the background at what's going on in their shop and how do they store things, or, you know, what kind of clamping solutions they got going on in the background, or that kind of thing. So
yeah, that was one of the things we thought was really cool, and Phil had sent pictures in Teams earlier today or yesterday. Shiraz had this really cool. So Shiraz has built a bunch of different projects, but he did a lot of guitars for a while, and he had this clamp cart set up where it was like this. It was this tall 5.5 foot tall cart that had these trays that slid in and out, and the trays were like had bar clamps attached to them. I didn't see how the bar clamps were attached, but they were attached on the bottom side somehow, so he could glue up small panels. And then over top, he had eye bolts with a black pipe going between them, and then he would use big wedges to wedge between the pipe and the panel to hold stuff flat. Which was super interesting. And Phil and I are like, hey, this could be like a ShopNotes project. Like, you think Shiraz would be offended if we like put him as the designer on it? You know, like it was pretty cool, like a little glue up station. Or I have to say, one of the coolest things. I mean, Shiraz had a lot of really, really nice lumber stashed away, so it was kind of cool seeing some of the stuff that he had stashed away. Stuff you can't really get anymore. He also had he kind of renewed my desire. We've talked about this a long time ago. He renewed my desire to kind of mix and match a woodworking project with some like, let's call them natural products. So like animal type products like antler or a horn. Shiraz has a really, really big like anti-poaching foundation in Africa, like huge. And some of the work that he's done for anti-poaching, he's been, you know, giving gifts from like the African government of like, you know, elephant tusks on a stand and stuff like that. And they're just beautiful materials. I mean, stuff clearly that you can't get today. So that was really cool to see. But one of the machines that I saw that I'm like, that thing's freaking amazing. He had the biggest sliding table saw I have ever seen. And I mean, it was sized so that you could rip an 8-foot sheet. Okay.
Yeah, so it had an 8-foot throw on the sliding bed.
Yeah. But the cooler thing, in my opinion, was the fence on it. It had a digital fence. And I videoed it. I'll send the video. I don't know if we can upload it at the show notes page or not, but if we can, we'll do it. Where he's like, hey, did somebody have a nickel? And I was like, yeah, here. And we stood up a nickel up against the fence. He moved the fence to like 38 inches, and then he typed in the same starting measurement, and that fence came in to about a quarter of an inch away from the nickel, and then it just went and slowly crept until it was resting right up against the nickel again.
Didn't knock it down.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty impressive.
So when you have to resaw a nickel,
yeah,
yes,
you got that.
Yeah, yeah. It also was, I thought, kind of eye-opening to because as hobbyist woodworkers, we know Grizzly from like their jointers and their bandsaws and their drill presses and stuff. And we both knew, I think, that Grizzly had bought a few companies, Shop Fox, South Bend, some kind of bigger companies that are different lines from their standard Grizzly stuff. I didn't realize how much they did in like the industrial space.
Right.
Because they had some really, really big planers, like planers the size of wide belt sanders there. And I had asked them about, hey, are you guys working on a flooring machine? Or when's a flooring machine coming? He's like, there's a prototype down in the room downstairs that we can't show you or we'd have to kill you. I'm like, I'll take a bullet. I don't care. So it was pretty awesome. It was very, very cool. I feel bad now because I don't own any Grizzly stuff.
Yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
So, all right. I think we've covered it all. What more can be said? If you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, put them in the comment section on our YouTube channel. You can send them to us at woodsmith@woodsmith.com. Who knows? They might get read in a future episode. But we read them all, and we'll respond to them as we get to them. So, again, I want to extend an invitation to come take a tour of the Woodsmith shop and studios. We're also going to be hosting a fall event, October 11th and 12th. It's a Friday and Saturday of 2024. So you want to mark your calendars to that. We're going to combine. This is the Captain Planet version with Popular Woodworking, ShopNotes, Woodsmith, and Fine Woodworking joining together to host an event with some special presenters, people from the staff, where you can meet us and find out a little bit more about what's going on here, and also learn a lot of really cool techniques and get some ideas for your own shop. We don't have a lot of the presenters nailed down right now, but I know that Logan's going to be doing a sawmilling demo. So if you've been interested in seeing that, you'll want to just kind of keep an eye out in the coming weeks for emails about when and how to register for that event. Otherwise, we'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks for listening to the ShopNotes Podcast. Bye.